The lecture hall of Diplomatic Anthropology 304 floated 200 meters above the capital city of Varesh Prime, a glass cocoon suspended in the mist-thick skies. Below, the city pulsed in quiet symphony, streams of light weaving between hovering spires, each one humming with bureaucratic purpose. The scent of sterilized air and recycled ozone filled the hall, mixing with the faint musk of alien fur and metallic exoshells. 100 species sat in tiered seats, their shapes and sizes so varied the room's climate field constantly adjusted to prevent fainting, molting, or spontaneous combustion. At the center of it all sat Professor Xrael of the Third Shell, a being resembling a mantis sculpted from mercury and patience. His voice, a smooth, clicking rhythm, filled the chamber. We gather today to examine primitive species diplomacy, namely, those curious bipeds of Sol 3. Humans. The word humans rippled through the air like a rumor. Jaws clicked. Tendrils quivered. A few students leaned in, equal parts curiosity and disbelief. After all, humanity had been a late addition to the Galactic Concord, a civilization that had clawed its way to the stars not through grace or enlightenment, but through stubbornness, caffeine, and an unnerving willingness to look danger in the eye and grin. At the back of the class, one such human sat cross-legged, leaning casually against the wall. Ambassador Elias Trent, the first Terran diplomat ever invited to instruct at the university, wore his suit like a man who'd made peace with chaos. His sleeves were rolled up. His ID badge hung at a rebellious tilt. He looked bored, which made everyone else uncomfortable. There was something disconcerting about a species that could smile during a lecture on interspecies warfare. Xrael's mandibles clicked as he gestured toward a containment field at the side of the hall. Inside, pacing in slow, deliberate circles, was the subject of today's demonstration, a Rendakian predator, a quadruped mass of muscle and teeth, captured from the outer jungles of Ardek 4. The beast's skin shimmered like molten graphite, its eyes twin embers of animal intellect. "Observe," said Xrael. "This is a Rendakian stalker. On its homeworld, it is apex. No known species can domesticate it. It recognizes no authority but hunger." A hush spread across the room, except for the faint scratching of claws against the glass. The containment field hummed. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You sure this thing's locked in, Professor?" The mantid didn't look at him. "Containment is absolute. The demonstration is safe." The human's grin deepened, the kind of grin that made other species nervous because it never quite matched the situation. "That's what they said about your cafeteria coffee machine last week." A few students chittered, laughter, awkward but genuine. Xrael's antennae twitched in mild irritation. "Ambassador Trent, this is an academic environment, not." And that's when the sound came. A low, warping snap. Then another. The lights flickered as containment seals bled sparks into the air. The Rendakian froze mid-step, nostrils flaring. The hum of the force field stuttered once, twice, then went silent. Every voice in the hall died. 100 eyes turned toward the beast, and then to the human who was still sitting, utterly still, one corner of his mouth curved upward as if this were all part of the syllabus. The predator took one heavy step forward. Then another. Its eyes locked onto the smallest creature in the room, the one without claws, armor, or scales. "The human," someone whispered. "It will eat him first." Elias exhaled once, long and calm. His voice, when it came, was low and almost amused. "Funny thing about predators," he murmured, as the beast began to crouch. "They hate competition." The Rendakian lunged, and that was when the entire room saw something impossible. The Rendakian struck like a bolt of living shadow, all muscle, claws, and hunger. Its roar reverberated off the lecture hall walls, shaking the transparent panels so hard several alien students dropped their tablets in terror. A dozen species bolted from their seats, their translators chirping warnings in half a dozen frequencies. The emergency lights turned crimson. But Elias Trent didn't move. He simply stood, slow and deliberate, like a man late to a meeting he didn't want to attend. His hands stayed loose at his sides, eyes locked on the predator that now towered over him, the distance between them closing in heartbeats. From the corner of the room, a student shrieked, "Professor, activate the shield!" Xrael's mandibles clicked furiously as he stabbed at the console. "It's unresponsive. Field integrity has collapsed." The Rendakian exhaled a thick, wet growl that fogged the air between them. Its breath smelled like metal and death. Its claws gouged deep grooves into the carbon floor, each sound like a gunshot. And then, it hesitated. For one trembling second, the galaxy's most feral apex predator just stared. Something flickered behind its ember eyes. Uncertainty. Recognition, maybe. Elias met that gaze without flinching. He didn't bare his teeth, didn't raise his hands, he just looked. Calm, unblinking. Predators knew that look. It was the kind that said, "I see you. I've been you. Don't try me." The silence became unbearable. Every creature in that room could feel it, an invisible pressure radiating outward from the human. Xrael's voice came out as a whisper click. "Is he challenging it?" The Rendakian's chest heaved. Muscles bunched beneath its obsidian hide, and then, impossibly, the beast lowered itself. Not in submission to force or fear, but to something older, recognition of an equal. It lay down. Slowly. Carefully. Gasps rippled through the class. A few of the telepathic species instinctively shielded their minds. The psychic feedback of such primal submission was overwhelming. Elias finally exhaled, shoulders relaxing as though a heavy door had just been closed. He crouched slightly, hands still visible, voice low enough to be gentle but firm enough to carry command. "Good," he said. "You're all right. Nobody's here to hurt you." The Rendakian blinked once. Its breathing steadied. Across the room, a tall crystalline student named Verta murmured in disbelief, "That should not be possible. It recognizes hierarchy only through blood dominance." "Or presence," Elias said without looking up. "You've all studied intellect. You forgot about instinct." The professor's antennae trembled. "Explain, Ambassador." Elias finally stood, brushing a bit of shattered glass from his sleeve. "Predators don't just hunt to eat. They measure each other. You can't fake calm around something built to smell fear. You show it you're in control, not through violence, but through certainty." A mechanical chirp interrupted him. The emergency drone swarmed in, blue light scanning the subdued creature. One drone emitted a confused beep. Its readings didn't make sense. Heart rate steady, adrenaline levels in check, and neural activity subdued as if tranquilized, but no tranquilizer had been fired. Xrael tilted his head, clicking softly. "You altered its state without pheromones, weaponry, or telepathy." "How?" Elias looked at him, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Humans have an old trick. We learned it from wolves. You meet the gaze, you don't flinch, and you remind them you're not prey." He turned back to the beast, still lying obediently at his feet like some monstrous, ancient hound rediscovering its leash. Around him, the alien students began whispering, half in awe, half in disbelief. One whispered, "Primitive. Yet terrifying." Another muttered, "He commanded it without sound." Xrael's compound eyes reflected the human stillness. The professor had spent cycles teaching that emotional control was a weakness in diplomatic negotiation, that empathy diluted dominance. And yet here it was, embodied in a species so young it had barely left its solar system. "Perhaps," Xrael began, hesitating for the first time in decades of lecturing, "we have misunderstood the term diplomat." Elias chuckled quietly, eyes still on the creature. "Diplomacy isn't about words, Professor. It's about what the other side believes you could do if words failed." The Rendakian's tail thumped once, slow, deliberate. A gesture not of defiance, but acknowledgement. Around the hall, the atmosphere shifted from panic to reverent silence. Even the drones hovered back, unsure if they were witnessing control or communion. One young cephalite student whispered, voice trembling, "Is that submission?" Elias smiled, not triumphantly, but knowingly. "Respect," he said softly. "The kind that only predators understand." And in that moment, every species in the hall understood why humanity, fragile, reckless, and woefully underdeveloped, had managed to carve a place among the stars. Not through power, not through technology, but through something far older. Something the galaxy had long forgotten. Silence lingered long after the Rendakian lay still. The kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It pulsed, alive, heavy with new understanding. For the first time in the university's long history, the students of 100 Worlds had witnessed something that no textbook could quantify: the convergence of intellect and instinct in a single heartbeat of control. Professor Xrael's faceted eyes reflected the prone creature, its breaths measured, its lethal jaws relaxed at the feet of a human barely taller than its shoulder. The manted scholar's mind raced, dissecting the implications even as his translator chip struggled to assign linguistic tags for what he'd seen. Dominance without violence. Command without telepathy. Fearlessness without aggression. No known model fit. No precedent matched. At last, he turned toward the still figure in the center of the hall. Ambassador Trent. His voice, though filtered through its precise electronic cadence, carried something that might have been awe. Was this display intentional? Elias looked up from where he knelt beside the beast, brushing a line of dust from his sleeve. His tone was casual, almost conversational. "No, Professor. I was just hoping it wouldn't ruin your floors." A ripple of hesitant laughter passed through the class, not the polite kind, but genuine, nervous release. The tension fractured like glass under heat. For the first time since the containment breach, students exhaled. The Rendakian's golden eyes shifted toward the sound, but it did not move. The human stood. His gaze swept the room, a hall filled with faces alien and anxious, still trying to reconcile what they had seen. "You all study species diplomacy," he said evenly. "Treaties, hierarchies, negotiation matrices. That's all useful, until you meet something that doesn't care about your language." He gestured to the predator. "You can't talk a creature like this into submission. You can't reason with hunger or hierarchy. You can only show it what you are. Not prey, not threat, just presence." Xrael tilted his head, antennae flickering in slow curiosity. "Presence," he echoed. "A metaphysical force." Elias smiled faintly. "No, Professor. Just posture and intent." A quiet hum of data recorders filled the space as the students began taking notes, some typing furiously, others sketching diagrams of behavioral resonance and dominance fields. The cephalite student, Verta, the crystalline being of pale blue light, raised a trembling appendage. "Ambassador, if I may, was the Rendakian submission a conditioned reaction? Some sort of phenomenal influence?" "Conditioned?" Elias chuckled. "Not in the way you mean. We didn't breed this into them, we earned it." He stepped closer to the beast, who lifted its head slightly, eyes following him with uncanny focus. Predators respect only what they recognize. Every move, every breath, every heartbeat tells them whether you're prey or peer. Humans just learned to lie well enough to fake it until we became it. The crystalline student hesitated. "You're saying fear became evolution?" Elias shrugged. "Fear taught us evolution. Every civilization here was born in safety. Ours was born in terror." That made the class go still again, not out of fear, but realization. The galaxy's elder species had forgotten what survival used to cost. The reflection. Later, after the Rendakian was safely recontained and sedated, the lecture hall buzzed with energy. Students of all species whispered and argued in hushed tones, their voices clashing in translation-lagged cadence. Words like instinct resonance, biopsychological mirroring, and predator empathy model fluttered across the room like data moths. And through it all, Elias Trent sat on the edge of the demonstration platform, hands folded loosely, eyes on the city below the glass floor, that living, pulsing web of light stretching far into the violet horizon of Varesh Prime. He looked small there, against the skyline. But in the reflection of the glass, where the city shimmered and warped, he looked almost vast. Professor Xrael approached, moving with insectal precision, his limbs whispering against the floor. "Ambassador Trent, the Chancellor requests a full debrief. But first," his mandibles flexed in hesitation, "I would like to understand. You did not display aggression. Yet you achieved dominance. Explain, if you can, the mechanism." Elias glanced at him, half smiling. "Mechanism? There isn't one." Xrael's antennae twitched in mild frustration. "There must be. Every phenomenon follows pattern. Even chaos has structure." The human's eyes returned to the skyline. "Maybe that's the difference between you and us, Professor. You all came from worlds where pattern won. You built civilization because you mastered your environments. Humans built ours because the environment tried to kill us every day, and we refused to die politely. The professor clicked slowly, his species equivalent of contemplation. Survival as identity. Exactly, Elias said softly. We stopped running, not because we were faster, but because we were tired of being prey. So we looked the universe in the eye, and for some reason, it blinked first. Xrael said nothing, but something subtle shifted in the way his head inclined toward the human. Respect, perhaps, or the beginnings of comprehension. The observation room. Hours later, the incident replayed across dozens of monitors in the observation wing. The Rendakian's leap slowed down to frames per second, analyzed by spectral filters and neural imaging overlays. The data told one story, the reality told another. The Predator's neural patterns showed confusion, hesitation, and finally, a biochemical response that mirrored submission to alpha presence. But there were no signals from a human, no pheromones, no psionic waves, no electromagnetic manipulation. Just the unblinking calm of eye contact. The senior xenobiologist of the university leaned back in disbelief. He didn't control it. He spoke to it. Impossible, another replied. No common language exists. Language doesn't always need words, said Xrael from the doorway, his tone uncharacteristically soft. They turned toward him, expecting analysis. Instead, he walked to the console and replayed the footage once more, this time at normal speed. He watched the human stand as the Rendakian advanced. No fear. No sudden movement. Just stillness, deliberate, patient, absolute. He murmured, mostly to himself, every species evolved from prey. Perhaps humans simply remember. The Rendakian. Meanwhile, deep below the university, the Predator rested in reinforced containment. It no longer paced, no longer growled. When the attending xenoveterinarian approached, the Rendakian's eyes lifted briefly, and then, inexplicably, it relaxed again. Its vitals remained steady, mind calm. It keeps glancing at the door, the technician noted in a hushed voice. As if it's waiting for the human. The technician's counterpart laughed nervously. Ridiculous. It doesn't form bonds. Its species has no social hierarchy. And yet, in the surveillance feed, the Rendakian's pupils dilated when Elias Trent walked past the corridor, not even entering, just passing nearby on his way to the debriefing chamber. The beast's head rose. Its heartbeat quickened once, then settled. Recognition. Respect. Predators understood each other, even across species. The debrief. The debrief chamber was stark, silver walls, soft amber lighting, and an observation panel hiding a dozen pairs of unseen eyes. Elias leaned against the table, sipping something that vaguely resembled coffee but tasted like rust and regret. The chancellor of the Galactic University, an ethereal being of pure photonic matter, materialized before him, her form shifting between humanoid outlines and geometric light. "Ambassador Trent," she said, her voice a chorus of layered tones. "The Council requests clarification. Was your act premeditated?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "If I'd planned for a 400-kilo murder lizard to jump out mid-lecture, I'd have worn a better tie." The Chancellor's lights flickered, the photonic equivalent of a sigh. "Humor, again." "It's a coping mechanism," he replied. "We're a very nervous species. We just hide it well." There was a pause, long, deliberate. The Council finds this event instructive. The Rendakian, one of the most aggressive life forms catalogued, submitted to a human without coercion. This suggests an unclassified influence. Elias set the cup down. "No influence. Just communication. You've been studying diplomacy as a science, Chancellor. Maybe it's time you treat it like an instinct." The Chancellor's form dimmed slightly, thoughtful. "Instinct, in diplomacy. A contradiction." "Only if you've forgotten where diplomacy came from," Elias said. "It started when one caveman realized bashing another's skull in wasn't the only way to win. It's not the absence of threat. It's the promise of peace backed by the potential of war." The light being studied him in silence. "The Council underestimated your species." Elias smiled faintly. Everyone does. That's our favorite part. The lesson. Weeks passed. The Rendakian incident, as it came to be known, became a case study across the university. Scholars debated endlessly. Was it dominant psychology? Subconscious pheromones? Some forgotten Terran trick of posture and scent? But for the students who had been there, who'd seen the human stand unarmed before a monster, no explanation quite captured the truth. They remembered how the air itself had shifted, how the predator's rage had bent beneath something invisible. They remembered the way the human stillness had filled the room like gravity. Xrael, once the foremost authority on behavioral diplomacy, rewrote his syllabus entirely. Where control once dominated his lessons, a new term appeared in the curriculum: presence theory, the human model. It spread like wildfire through the academic web. Ambassadors began studying Terran behavior. Negotiators practiced calm breathing. Even the Rendakian species, once considered untamable, was re-evaluated. Across the stars, the legend of the Diplomat began to circulate. The conversation. One evening, under the fading gold of Varesh Prime's twin suns, Professor Xrael visited Elias at the observation deck, a panoramic bubble overlooking the city. The human was there, of course. Sitting on the rail like gravity was a suggestion. "Beautiful," Elias murmured, watching the storm band swirl across the horizon. "Looks peaceful from up here. Hard to believe there's 100 species down there arguing about everything." "Conflict," Xrael said, joining him. "The price of sentience." Elias chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's what keeps us sharp." They stood in silence a while. The professor finally said, "You taught the galaxy something today. Not just about humans, about the nature of dominance itself." Elias tilted his head. "Did I? I thought I just stopped lunch from escaping." The mantid's mandibles clicked, a sound that might have been amusement. "Your humor hides wisdom, Ambassador." "Old habit," Elias said. "Makes the wisdom harder to shoot at." They shared a moment of companionable silence. Then Xrael said quietly, "When I first studied your species, I thought of humanity as volatile. A paradox, compassionate yet cruel, fragile yet fearless. Now I see. You are not paradoxes. You are balance incarnate, the line between prey and predator." Elias watched the city lights shimmer like constellations reflected in motion. "We just never forgot what it felt like to be hunted. Every instinct we have, empathy, curiosity, courage, comes from that. The trick isn't forgetting fear. It's learning to carry it without letting it steer." The professor turned to him. "And that is what made the beast kneel." "No," Elias said softly. "That's what made me not run." The legacy. In the years that followed, the Diplomatic Anthropology Department on Varesh Prime installed a permanent exhibit, the Rendakian Encounter. Hollow projections showed the moment the field collapsed, the lunging predator, the human stillness. Visitors of every shape and species watched, analyzed, speculated. At the center of the exhibit, etched into crystal beneath a looping display, were the words attributed to Ambassador Elias Trent. "Predators respect calm. Prey obey fear. Diplomats learn both." It became a mantra not just for diplomats, but for soldiers, scientists, and explorers across the stars. And somewhere on a distant world, a new generation of Rendakians were being observed, quieter now, less violent, more aware. When humans visited their habitats, the beasts didn't attack. They watched. They waited. Sometimes they bowed. No one could explain it. But everyone understood. The closing. Years later, long after Elias Trent retired from active service, the Galactic University held a convocation in his honor. The hall was full. Students, ambassadors, even former skeptics. Xrael took the podium, his voice steady, reflective. The galaxy once believed that power came from control, that intellect triumphed over instinct. But today we understand a greater truth, that intellect without instinct is blindness, and that perhaps, among the stars, the smallest predator still carries the greatest presence. Applause filled the hall. The recording of the Rendakian submission played once more, a timeless symbol of respect without domination. At the back of the hall, Elias smiled faintly, hands in his pockets. When the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, he turned toward the great window one last time, watching the storm lines over Varesh glimmer like veins of living silver. He whispered to no one in particular. Funny how they still call it the day the Predator submitted. He sipped his drink, smirking to himself. It wasn't submission. It was a conversation. Outside, lightning forked across the clouds, bright, silent, powerful. And for one fleeting moment, it looked like the universe winked back. Every species learns to survive. Only humans learned to negotiate with fear.